All right, hi everybody. So here we are at our second hike, and today we are at Sweetwater. It's actually called Sweetwater Preserve, and there's actually two locations for this place, or two entrances. We are at the 16th Avenue entrance, which is kind of the smaller of the two. The bigger one is actually a much larger location, which is a little bit further down Williston Road, and it's a much larger wetlands preserve, and it's more open, and it actually opens up to Payne's Prairie. So this actually follows Sweetwater Creek, which is literally right behind the sign over here. And this creek is sort of drains a big part of the urban area of Gainesville, and it runs out and eventually, like I said, goes into Payne's Prairie. And so there's a map, and it gives you some information here. And this is all part of a much larger conservation sort of area that's sort of connected, and it's very important. It's a very important part of sort of a plan for the city, and especially for wastewater management. So anyway, this particular preserve, we're here today because we're going to be talking about fungi. The kingdom fungi, in fact, which is one of the kingdoms of life on planet Earth. So we've been, as we've sort of started this journey of discussing biodiversity, we are going to be talking about fungi today, because fungi are in many ways not given a lot of consideration in biology. They're not given a lot of consideration in biology courses that you might have taken in high school or in college even. And for a lot of people, they're kind of a mystery. They're very important, and we're going to talk about that today. And I really want to make sure that you have an opportunity to learn about them. And so today we're going to do a little bit of, we're going to sort of do a fungal foray, which is where you go out and you actually sort of collect mushrooms and fungi and kind of get a sense for the diversity of them that occurs in a location. And you're going to get an opportunity to sort of learn a little bit about all the just amazing functions that they provide, both in natural settings, but also in terms of the different ways that fungi have been used by man. Because fungi are incredibly important because of the different ways that they can transform substrates. They're known as nature's chemists, and so we're going to talk about that some. So anyway, it's a really great opportunity, and then you're going to get to see a little bit of Sweetwater Preserve, because this is a really great place to hike. Like I said, it follows a creek, it's a really beautiful little creek, and this is a really nice little place. It's a nice example of what we consider to be a bottomland forest, or a floodplain forest. There's a nice kind of a low area here along the creek, and then it actually, as you go towards the south, it actually follows kind of a more upland area and kind of goes up a hill. So you can go, if you want to go up that trail to the south, you can go that way. So it follows several different areas and goes into different types of habitats. So we'll get to show you some of that today. So let's talk about fungi a bit. So I'm not here by myself. Somebody's actually running the camera. So the person who's running the camera is Claudia Paez. She is actually one of my PhD students, and I'm going to introduce her. So Claudia, say hello.
Hello.
So Claudia is actually working on fungi. She actually works not just with me, but with another mycology lab on campus. That's Matt Smith, who's in the plant pathology department. And she has been working with fungi for quite a while. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing with fungi?
Yes, so
Go ahead.
so I'm studying like decay fungi in trees. So I have, and I do some phylogenetic work. I don't know if you know about this.
Well, go ahead and tell them a little bit about what is phylogenetic work. Tell them what that means.
So it's like we want to know.
No, go ahead. Just go ahead. Continue. It's a complex subject, right? So phylogenetic work basically means that you're going and trying to sort of reconstruct the evolutionary relationships of organisms, right? You're trying to sort of understand how organisms are related to each other. So how do you do that?
So we do. take a look at different genes, and then we compare the different fungi that are close related to each other.
Right.
And then we construct like a phylogenetic tree, and then you can see how far or how close is one species of fungi from another one.
Okay. So why would we want to do that? What's the reason for doing that?
It's important to know ecology, where things belong, like which is close related, or what properties. Like sometimes we don't know the properties of some fungi or even some trees, and then when we found out that that organism is close related to another one that we know, they have similar properties. They can have similar properties.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so, you know, I mentioned this on you don't know this, Claudia, but I did mention it in my first introduction to the course, that, you know, it's estimated that there may be up to as many as perhaps 5 million species of fungi globally, something like that. And I mean, some estimates, but it could be lower, but it could be up to that many. But the percentage of those species that have been actually identified and have been recognized, you know, formally is like way, you know, it's way less than that, you know. And so in order to recognize those species, to formally identify, you know, where the limitations are between those species, we need to go through the process that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's essentially the sort of the standard in terms of the scientific standard that's required for doing that, right? And so you're working on that, and so one of the things that Claudia is working on in particular is looking at fungi that are associated with trees and those that cause decay in trees, right? Yes. Because, you know, trees are made up of wood. Wood is made up of especially two complex, what we would consider to be carbohydrates, essentially, right? Or these really complex molecules, lignin and cellulose, right? And fungi are really the primary organisms, or essentially the only organisms that are able to break down those two molecules, right? And so, well, you want me to talk more? I see. Well, so Claudia is working on that, and she's trying to understand what are the primary fungi that are breaking those down, especially here in Florida, in urban areas in Florida. So she's doing a survey and trying to better understand what species are breaking those down, you know, in trees in urban areas, especially in Florida. So she set out to, you know, kind of do this survey, and really, interestingly, we don't really know a lot about these decay fungi, especially in Florida. A lot of the work that's been done on decay fungi has been done in temperate climates, especially in Western Europe and more in the northeastern U.S. But in Florida, there's a lot of undiscovered biodiversity, and one of the projects Claudia has done has been working on a fungus that was previously thought to be something, and it looks like she may be describing a new genus even, right? Yeah. So what's the name of that one?
It's Latiporus persicinus.
Latiporus persicinus. Yes. Okay.
From the Latiporus, Latiporus genus.
And it's related to another one. It's that sometimes people eat. What's that one called?
Latiporus sulphureus.
Latiporus sulphureus.
Chicken of the woods.
Chicken of the woods, right? Okay.
But it's not in the same. It's not in the same clade or same genus. It's
right.
Far from the.
But it was thought to be previously.
It was thought to be, but
right.
Then more people sequence more other fungi, and Latiporus persicinus fall out of the clade of the whole.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of thing that you learn from these phylogenetic studies that Claudia has been doing. Okay, so let's just talk just before we start our hike here. And Claudia is actually going to be spending some time here while I go off and look and do a little survey for fungi myself and talk and show you some things along the way. Claudia is going to go look for some of these decay fungi here as part of her project. But before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about fungi in general. Let's just talk about the basics of fungi. What are fungi? Okay, let's just talk about that a bit. So, I mean, you know, what makes a fungus and not a plant? So, you know, if you guys were here right now, I might ask you, and say, is anybody in here in this group? Can any of you tell me that, you know, what makes a fungus and not a plant? So I'm going to ask Claudia, because Claudia is my PhD student, and you know, this is a good practice for her prelim exam. See, she's you know, staring daggers at me right now. I can see that. But let's see. So what makes a fungus and not a plant, Claudia? You know, what would be something you could say would separate it from the kingdom Plantae, or for example?
The properties. They have way different properties.
Yeah, but let's just start with the basics. Like, how does it make food related to a plant?
So it degrades food. It needs a substrate.
It eats a substrate, right?
It needs a substrate.
So
there's
that
different. Some fungi eat live things. Some eat dead things. So, but they all need something to feed on them.
Right. Right. So it's doing that with enzymes. It's breaking down.
Enzymes.
So
Enzymes to break down.
So we call that extracellular metabolism, right? It's not, and plants do it through
with the sun, with the sunlight.
Yeah, through photosynthesis, right? Yeah, they use chlorophyll and photosynthesis to do that. So plants are able to do it, through this totally unique process, making their own sugars through photosynthesis, whereas fungi do it through, through this process of breaking down whatever's nearby. And that's why I said they're nature's chemists, because they have this amazing arsenal of chemicals, of enzymes essentially, and they're able to, because of that, they have this really remarkable suite of chemicals and compounds, not only for that, but also because of competition with other organisms. And we'll talk a bit about that more. But anyway, this is really pretty fascinating stuff. And then, of course, they're not animals either. They're separate from animals too. And there's some things that separate them from animals, right? Like, I mean, they don't possess some things that animals have. Well, I mean, they have an extracellular metabolism, meaning that they sort of secrete enzymes outside of their body to break things down, right? Well, an animal doesn't do that, right? An animal does it internally, right? Yeah. Are there other things that sort of separate them? I mean, like, what's a fungus made up of? Let's talk about its structure a bit. I mean, the cell walls are made up of. Yeah, right. They're made up of something called chitin, right? So they have this really strong material called chitin, and so their cell walls have this material that insects also, the bodies of insects have it in them, and certain crustaceans have it in them. So if you think of like a lobster, for example, that what makes up the shell of a lobster, well, that same material is in the body of a fungus as well. A lot of people don't realize that, but some fungi are incredibly strong, and that's why they're able to break through wood in some ways, and it's even sometimes we have pictures of mushrooms popping up through asphalt, for example. They're very, very, very strong, not just because of their enzymes, but also because of this chitin that they have. But the body of the fungus is actually made up of these thread-like growths. They produce this filamentous growth, which is, and we call that hyphae. And all taken together, if you have a bunch of it, we call it mycelium. It's like little hairs, and there can be a massive amount of this that you don't really see, but it can produce this underground network in soil or in the wood, and it's incredible. And that's how it is able to sort of penetrate and grow, and that we call it the vegetative part of the organism, right? Mm-hmm. But they reproduce, right? And how do they reproduce? They don't produce seeds. They reproduce what? Spores, right? So these spores are produced usually in what we call fruiting bodies, and these fruiting bodies can be remarkably diverse. I mean, that's what we're here to see today, are these fruiting bodies. We call them mushrooms sometimes, or sometimes they're not necessarily mushrooms. It depends on the type of fungus, right? Sometimes they can be microscopic, sometimes they can be, macroscopic. In other words, we see them and they're large, but they are incredibly diverse. These spores can be unbelievable. One mushroom can produce 1 billion spores. 1 billion spores in 24 hours. One mushroom. Mm-hmm. So you're breathing spores right now. We both are. We're breathing those fungal spores. They're going into our lungs. Some of those could be bad, by the way. We could talk about that. Some of them are good. And a lot of these fungi are, in the environment, obviously have interacted with all the other living organisms to create important, what we call symbioses, right? What would be an example of a fungal symbiosis that you could explain?
Mycorrhizal.
organism.
Mycorrhizas.
Yeah. What is a
So those are
mycorrhiza?
fungi that are close, like, well, to trees. So they help trees to get all the nutrients. Whenever the tree cannot get